Are we ready? Are we ready?
Yes.
That did not sound good.
Yeah.
There's a little spice in these things. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. You get 20 seconds to answer if you're playing on the app. And so here we go.
What happens if you're not playing on the app?
So
You can keep track of your answers on the back of one of those sheets if you'd like.
Or just guess.
Salvador is the country of.
Okay.
We're giving pupusas to the winner.
What is this?
Oh.
This is a question.
So the question is, El Salvador is a country of great natural beauty and frequent natural disasters, great economic disparity and violence, joy, hope, and hospitality, all of the above. And did everybody get all of the above? All right, you can't prove it though.
Very true.
All right, so all of the above, and that's a really important thing we always like people to remember, because sometimes it can stereotypically get depicted as a poor country in crisis. And yes, there are crises in that country, and yes, there's a lot of poverty, but it's much more complex than that. So that we like to always offer that as context. Okay, next question.
Grace won that one.
Oh, Grace must have gotten it first. What is the population of El Salvador? 10 million, 6 million, 23 million, or 1 billion?
6 million.
Okay, the correct answer is 6 million. So it's a country that has, again, Donna, yay, going for 100. There are about the same number of people in El Salvador as there are in Wisconsin, roughly equivalent. So,
And size-wise?
that's the next question.
Oh, okay.
So see if you can guess that one. How big is El Salvador?
About the same size.
Oh, okay, same as California, same size as Montana, same size as Delaware, same size as New Jersey.
Physically.
All right, good job, about the same size as New Jersey. So pretty small. Okay, next question.
Schaefer's are beating
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Uh-oh, that's pressure. El Salvador is bordered by what two countries? Mexico and Belize, Honduras and Guatemala, Honduras and Nicaragua, Nicaragua and Guatemala. Yeah, let's not shout the answers out. And the answer is Honduras and Guatemala. Okay, next, bonus question. Schaefer's still in the lead there. What are these three countries sometimes called? See if you can guess. The Great American Trifecta, the Southern Triad, the Northern Triangle, or the Northern Triad?
There are no hints.
There are no hints on this page at all. It is the Northern Triangle. Have any of you heard about the Northern Triangle in the discussion of immigration? Often it's referred to because it's those three countries that are Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And does anyone remember what happened in those countries in this fall? The caravan came from those three countries predominantly, okay? So they all have similar situations in their countries. They all have gang violence. They all have limited economic opportunity. Their cultures are very similar. So they've earned this name because of the similarities and the problems. They all have a common question, Judy?
Yeah. How old are these countries? Their current government, or their current,
Borders?
Yeah.
That's a really good question that I don't know that I can answer with a lot of authority, but I think that as with most countries in South America, Central America, and Africa, the borders that define them now were probably put in place during colonial years. So for instance, there's a heavy Spanish influence in those countries, those three countries and the countries around them speak Spanish. So the borders were probably defined at that time.
1700s.
Pardon me?
1700s.
Yeah, I mean, if you are interested, I can look. We have some, I don't know if you remember, when the conquistadors came, but I don't know when the borders.
I thought
Probably
Santa Ana
earlier
went
than
back.
So, yeah, back when they started, think about when the conquistadors came to Mexico, would have been about the same timing. When the borders were set, may have been a little bit different though. Okay, next question.
Grace is catching up.
Pressure's on Grace. Grace is beating Jesus Christ, how about that? What is the name of the indigenous people of El Salvador? The Papil, the Salvadorans, the Incas, and the Aztecans. Okay, the correct answer is Papil. What's interesting about this is, interesting and sad, is I think about 2% of the population is actually pure Papil at this point because there's so many other races that have become intermixed because of colonialism. And there was an effort on the behalf of the Spaniards and the 14 families that essentially ruled El Salvador to diminish the indigenous influence on the culture. So there has been a resurgence of interest, and we have some t-shirts actually. I was hoping Kari would wear hers, but she didn't. It says soy PPL. So there is more of a celebration of that indigenous culture, but it's been kind of pushed aside. Okay, next. Who is the artist that inspired a style of folk art in El Salvador? Fernando Gomez, Fernando Rodriguez, Fernando Yort, or Fernando Ramos. And I'll give you a hint, his first name is Fernando.
He's right there in the middle of the
He's in the
picture.
middle of the picture.
And he just died a year ago.
Yeah, Fernando Yort. The pictures that are on your table are designs of his. That is typical of his style, that has influenced a whole style in the country of El Salvador. He actually started a workshop, an artist cooperative in the city of La Palma, and it's called Semillas de Dios, Seeds of God. And it employs, is it 10,000 people? I think, do you remember?
I know it's not millions.
It's not millions. I think it's 10,000 people. But they're gainfully employed. Handcraft items are very productive business in El Salvador. Anyway, he's a very interesting man. He studied classically in Europe and in the United States. He actually went to seminary for a while, so there's a lot of intersection between art and religion for him. His images are usually filled with the sense that God is present all around us, in people, in nature, in animals. So this was, I can say, I would think Chris probably agrees, and Kari, that it was one of the most exciting, memorable days of my life to meet him, because his influence is so great, and he was just so charming and gracious. And unfortunately, he died this past November of Parkinson's. So. Okay, next.
Very hard to
What is a remittance? The cancellation of a debt, forgiveness, a fee paid to a coyote, or transfer of money from a foreign worker to family at home.
Transfer money.
It is the transfer of money from foreign workers to family at home. You still got a 100 done? Yes. All right. So, first of all, this is a little off topic, but does everybody know what a coyote is? Okay, so not the animal, but the person who leads you north. And those fees are very expensive, they're like $11,000. So imagine a poor family trying to find that kind of money. So, does anyone know what the significance of remittances is in El Salvador?
Yeah, it's a big part of their GDP.
Okay, so a lot of people have family who are working in the United States or other countries, predominantly the United States, who send money home. Okay, next. In 2018, what was the total amount of remittances sent by Salvadorans living in other countries? $5.47 billion, $63.9 million, $13 billion, or $1.3 billion?
13 million.
It's an annual amount.
53 million.
Million times.
There's a lot of stuff.
The correct answer is $5.47 billion. Isn't that amazing? So if you take that and spread it out over the population of El Salvador, it's roughly $830 per every man, woman, and child in El Salvador per year. Which, $831 is a lot to us, but I meant to look up the average salary in El Salvador. It's probably under 20,000, wouldn't you think? 10,000 maybe. So $800 is a lot of money.
Between 4 and 5
Income
thousand.
comes from your relative.
Yeah, I know between 4 and 5,000, at least the poor, a lot of families make that. The pastors in the church make 6,000, some of them, and that's considered pretty decent. So, who is the Salvadoran martyr who said, "If they kill me, I will rise in the Salvadoran people"? Fernando Yort, Farabundo Martí, Oscar Romero, or Mauricio Funes? Good job, Oscar Romero. So we could do a whole session or more on Oscar Romero. But he was a man who was revered by the people as a leader and a liberator and a saint, and he was recently just beatified by the Catholic Church and became a saint in October of this year. Huge, huge, huge celebration in El Salvador. And his words rang true because his voice still continues to carry weight in El Salvador and the world.
And how was he killed? How did he die?
Murdered.
You know?
I think it was the week before Palm Sunday, 1981, I believe it was. He was presiding over a communion service and was shot through the heart by a sniper. They eventually did find out who the person was, and I think he went to jail. I'm not sure if that was all.
There's never been an apology on it.
There's never been an apology on the whole thing, but so we go to that church where he was assassinated, and they actually have photos of it. One of the things that you see in El Salvador, in a lot of countries, is we would never put up death photos into our newspapers or anything like that, or put it on TV. It's kind of proof for them. So they make sure they do. It's in the newspapers, and so they have a lot of pictures up. They have the house where he lived. The nuns had given him a little house on the hospital campus where he served. So he, instead of being at the huge basilica downtown and having that be where his office was, he put his office in a little community where there was a cancer care hospital, and so that little church became the Archbishop's church, and so he had a little room that he stayed in. So now it's a shrine. So they have lots of different pictures and memorabilia from his time. They have the chasuble, the robe you wear when you do communion with the bullet hole through it and the blood, things like that. So, but we, I don't think you were at that one. In our first visit to El Salvador, there was a couple of us who went, Mark Peterson, Bruce and I, It happened to be one of the anniversaries. And literally, they probably had people from all over the world come into that church. They had about 100 priests doing a 3-hour church service, and then a procession all the way down to the cathedral, walking the 2 miles down to the cathedral. So very powerful story of his life and his death, and even the story. So his death literally lit the powder keg of the Civil War. So when he died, that was the end. People started to fight back, and that's when the whole Civil War started. Went on for, I think it was 11 years, something like that. So
his death was definitely connected to the government.
Oh, absolutely,
Yes.
no question about it.
yeah, so the government forces really called for his assassination.
He was nominated to be Archbishop because the thought was that he was such a book-learned person that he wouldn't speak out and he wouldn't be advocating on the part of the poor. But he became liberalized and empowered by what was happening around him and became a strong voice, which was upsetting to the government, which had hoped he would not take a position.
There's a Hollywood movie of Romero, just called Romero. It's a really good movie. We show it to all of our groups that go, just to give a little bit of a summary of his life, and it shows the transformation that he went through, being very quiet, didn't want to cause any stir, till where a number of incidents that really forced him and moved him towards speaking out on behalf of the poor, even to the point where he knew he was going to be assassinated at some point. That's where some of these words of, they may kill me, but my words will rise in the Salvadoran people. So,
If you're interested in learning more about him, we have a lot of books on him that we're happy to loan out. There's a children's book on the table if anyone wants to look at it, and there's a little packet of some of his quotes on the table up there. Okay, next question. Who is the bishop of the Salvadoran Lutheran Church? Medario Gomez, Santiago Rodriguez, Rafael Mendibar, or Guadalupe Cortez?
it's not the guy in the white.
Just in case you might be
Just in case
confused
you
if he
might-
looks so Salvadoran. It is Medario Gomez, who has been the only,
He's been the only bishop for the church in its entire life. So starting right around the time of the Civil War, and then continuing on. One of the famous crosses is up in front on the left. It's a replica of it called the Subversive Cross. And during the war, they knew anyone that spoke up against the government would be disappear. They would be captured and disappeared and usually killed. And so they said, well, if we can't speak out, we're going to write the crimes of our country onto the cross. And so these are all different things that they were experiencing during that Civil War. And there's a really interesting story then about the cross, because the cross then became subversive, speaking out against the government because all these things that are written on there. And so they came in and took the cross and kidnapped the cross from the church. And but the interesting thing about that in a very Catholic country is you can't destroy a cross. And so the cross ended up getting taken to, are you going to tell us the whole story?
no,
Okay.
I was thinking this one.
Keep us moving though. So it ended up getting taken to the compound where the soldiers lived, and it kept speaking out to them. They eventually returned it at the end of the war. So
I think the United States government got involved to help. It was almost like it were a person who was a hostage because they enlisted the help of, I think, of our ambassador.
Bishop Gomez's wife is right behind him there, Pastor Avelina. So they're both very influential people in the city.
Okay, what is the name of our partnership ministry in El Salvador? Casa de Amor, Casa Esperanza, Casa de Paz, or Casa de Espera?
It's also the name.
And it is Pasa Esperanza. Good job. There's a picture of it. And that is continuing to be our partnership. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We have a video to show you. And we'll talk about some changes that are happening there. Okay, when we first began our partnership with El Salvador, 1999, 2015, 2010, 2008. 2008. Good job. Okay, why? Oh, next question.
What?
Oh, I took one out. Okay, never mind. What is the global mission model that's followed by the ELCA? Church planting, evangelizing and conversion, endowment, or accompaniment? And accompaniment is the answer. Does everybody in this room know what accompaniment is? Is there anyone who would like to
Does
explain?
anybody know what this is?
In a nutshell? Do you want to explain it in a nutshell? No?
Yeah, I'm just feeling very distracted by my top of the front.
What?
Yeah, I can explain it. So accompaniment is the idea of like everyone sitting together at one table. So we're mutual partners instead of it being a system of like someone has the power and the money and they come in to like save the other people. It takes the savior mentality out of it. And it's the idea of everyone sitting at a table with a mutual respect for each other and a equally as important part. And it's the idea of listening and relationship forming rather than looking from your own lens and thinking that you know exactly what to do to help or fix. It's the idea of basing everything in relationships and what can we gain from each other.
So it's the opposite of what Americans usually do.
Exactly. And also the scripture passage they usually use to exemplify it is the road to Emmaus, that story where the disciples are walking together after Jesus is crucified, not understanding that he's, what's happened. But that idea of walking with each other, talking and listening. So it's a very different model. Next. Okay, which one of the two of these is better? Building a state-of-the-art kitchen at Casa Esperanza or sitting with the men at Casa Esperanza and playing games? Oh, good job. You guys all understand accompaniment. Awesome. A lot of times mission trips to foreign countries like this are about, wow, wouldn't it be great if this antiquated ministry had a state-of-the-art kitchen to cook for these men without talking to the people in the kitchen and saying, what would you like? What would help you the most? And time again, when we go to Casa Esperanza, we'll say, what can we do? Let's go, here's some games, go sit down, play. So, okay, is that? Oh, there's one more. Migration from El Salvador is down significantly in 2018 from the previous year, up significantly, about the same, or up slightly. It is down significantly. Is that surprising to most of you? Okay, so from El Salvador, the number of people who are being intercepted, these are measured by interceptions at our border, in the Mexican border. In the United States, interceptions of Salvadorans are down about 50%. So very significant. But interceptions for people from Guatemala and Honduras were up quite a bit. So nobody quite understands what happened, except that possibly so many people in the United States affected by temporary protected status, which allows people to stay in this country and work legally, even if they're not citizens, was revoked. That was a big news story several months ago. And there are about 200,000 Salvadorans affected by that. So there is some speculation that Salvadorans living here have told people, don't come now, it's not a good time. They lost their ability to work legally because their TPS status has been revoked. So, not sure why, but sometimes what you hear in the news doesn't accurately portray a whole picture. So, next question. What are the two biggest reasons Salvadorans choose to migrate? Violence and lack of economic opportunity to escape violence and to join family in the U.S., or a sense of adventure and to reunite with family, to join gangs in the U.S. and join family? And the correct answer is violence and lack of economic opportunity. Now that doesn't mean that the blue one is wrong. Some people do go to escape violence and also they have, half their family living here and want to join them. But the two biggest reasons are lack of economic opportunity and violence. And I did print an article which is over on that table. It's an excerpt from a much longer New York Times article which is cited here and it's interesting to read. But this is just the story of one person who came to the United States recently because his father and two brothers were killed and there was a death sentence on him. So he had absolutely no choice but to come. So now he's living in an apartment in New York. He sends $100 home to his mother, $100 home to his wife, and he pays $1,000 a month to the coyote who helped him escape. So imagine that. That's the reality, and he's still living in fear of gang retribution. He can't go home because of it, and there are some MS-13 members in the United States. So it's just a very interesting article where you can see the intersection of immigration and gang activity in the country. So that's the last question, I think.
Schaefer's won.
I wonder who God's word are.
Jesus should
could
have won.
be. What?
Jesus should have won. He was close.
But Jesus didn't. Maybe he should have chosen a different name. Okay. So, any questions about what was on that quiz? Any general questions about that? Any surprises? Okay, so we wanted to spend the rest of the time talking about our partnership, and I don't know if we should show the video first, or?
Yes.
Okay, so our formal partnership right now is with Casa Esperanza, the homeless shelter, and it is under new management now, and they have really impressed with what they're doing and the transparency they're providing us, and they have just recently released a video that we wanted to share. It's subtitled in English.
Amor y Solidaridad es un ministerio de la Iglesia Luterana de la Resurrección que surge en 1998 para dar atención especial a familias que viven en condiciones muy vulnerables.
Allí muchas personas literalmente viven en la calle. Son indigentes, personas que viven gracias a la misericordia de Dios.
Yo he vivido esta historia.
Cuéntenos un poco de esa historia.
Esa historia yo andaba reciclando y de repente vine aquí a Casa de Esperanza y me aceptaron para que yo viviera aquí y ayudara a colaborar.
Pues la calle es una vida terrible, es como un infierno vivir en la calle, ¿no? Yo no he vivido gran cantidad de años, pero en los 6 años que estuve en la calle, pues...
Everybody read that?
La Iglesia Luterana La Resurrección está ubicada en el barrio San Miguelito, San Salvador, una zona azotada por la pobreza. Allí entre sus calles se puede observar a mujeres, niños, niñas, ancianos y ancianas, viviendo a la intemperie, víctimas de vicios, drogas, alcohol y en el abandono social.
Pues la Casa de la Esperanza es un espacio donde recibimos personas en extrema pobreza. Además de eso, personas que andan en la calle debido a las consecuencias del vicio, por consumir drogas, alcohol y todo, cualquier tipo de vicio. Y estas personas, pues, a consecuencia de la extrema pobreza, andan en la calle porque no tienen dónde vivir. Y los otros que tal vez en un tiempo tuvieron dónde vivir, pues el vicio les ha llevado a andar en la calle, a perder su familia, a perder hasta su dignidad como personas.
Cifras oficiales señalan que El Salvador es un país de 6.3 millones de habitantes. De estos, 3.4% se encuentran en condiciones de pobreza. Esto agudizado por la falta de empleo, el frágil sistema educativo, la inseguridad, entre otros factores que impactan en la población.
Y no podemos, como iglesia, comunidad cristiana, quedarnos con los brazos cruzados cuando vemos, observamos y escuchamos el dolor de las personas más sufridas, más necesitadas.
Aquí recibimos una cantidad de 10 mujeres al mes. Y ellos vienen de lunes a jueves a alimentarse, a recibir baño, lavar su ropa, medicina, acompañamiento pastoral, actividades lúdicas, terapia ocupacional. Y están las mujeres entre los 20 a los 53 años. Tenemos niños, tenemos 8 niños, entre niños y niñas, entre los años 3 y 12 años. Son los que vienen y los que reciben atención. Los hombres, hombres hay más. Tenemos 52, en este mes hemos revisado la estadística, hemos atendido 52 hombres, entre la edad de 25 años a 85 años.
Empecé a venir aquí, tengo como unos 5 o 6 años de estar viniendo, como les digo. Luego me pasó un accidente, y pues me dijeron de que me quería recuperar, como les digo, pero con ciertas condiciones también de uso, de dejar ciertas cosas, porque es lógico. Pues empezando por los vicios, que es lo que nos arrastra a la calle directamente.
Yo les digo que no se queden así, que salgan de eso, pues, porque aquí se les da apoyo, pues, para que ellos dejen de andar en la calle.
¿Qué hace ahora usted aquí en Casa Esperanza?
Colaboro, ayudo a pelar la verdura, hacemos fresco, limpieza.
Si bien no toda la gente que llega al lugar logra rehabilitarse, un porcentaje de ellos y ellas sí, eso hace que valga la pena seguir.
Estas personas necesitan desde ropa, necesitan alimentación, necesitan educación, necesitan atención psicosocial. En la Casa de la Esperanza se les da la oportunidad para que lleguen, puedan limpiar su cuerpo, bañarse, hacer aseo a su ropa y sobre todo un lugar a donde puedan tener los servicios sanitarios y no lo hagan en la calle.
Sí recibimos donaciones de personas altruistas, de empresas de alimentos preparados, que ellos sí nos donan, y también de iglesias a nivel internacional, iglesias hermanas que nos acompañan. Gracias a ellos este ministerio es posible, porque de otra manera nosotros no podríamos llevar esta misión a la que Dios nos ha llamado.
20 años han pasado desde la fundación de este sueño. Las necesidades son cada día más apremiantes, pero al ver los resultados y la atención especial por los más necesitados y necesitadas que impulsa la Iglesia Luterana Salvadoreña, amor y solidaridad y Casa La Esperanza son más que un sueño, son un desafío permanente.
Ellos me dijeron que si quería yo rehabilitarme, pues me dieron la oportunidad de darme este apartamento, a que yo no estuviera aseado, pero con la condición esa, vaya en las condiciones de horario, de salidas y entradas. Pues yo tenía necesidad y tenía ganas también de cambiar un poco mi vida, no un poco, sino que cambiara directamente nuevamente a estar normal. Acepté eso, entonces ahorita ya llevo más o menos un año de estar así. Gracias a Dios me curaron, me compraron medicina, me curaron, y uno pues en agradecimiento pues como que estoy pues tengo que colaborar, entonces yo me estoy colaborar pues en lo que me han dicho que colabore.
Si yo vengo de la calle ahorita y le digo, hermana, ayúdenme, ¿qué haría por mí?
Bueno, yo, si usted viene en la calle y no tiene ropa, yo le buscaría algo que se pusiera, pues, y le diría, vaya a bañarse ahí donde comen todos y espere el almuerzo.
Un almuerzo que se les da, un almuerzo digno para cada persona que se sienta en la mesa de la Casa de la Esperanza.
Padre eterno, gracias por el alimento que tú nos das, Señor. Bendícelo. Bendice las manos también que lo han hecho posible. Y bendice a las personas que colaboran en Casa de Esperanza.
So a number of those people that we saw on the video, we see every year when we go. The woman who spoke several times has 2 sons who are sponsored by St. Matthew's. And both boys are doing well. Our older boy wants to pursue a career in medicine. I think he wants to be a nurse. So, do you want to say anything about Casa Esperanza or future? Okay. So Casa Esperanza continues to be our partnership. As we kind of alluded to and spoken a bit somewhat, our partnership has changed in the past year and a half due to some developments that we are made aware of in terms of overlapping partnerships and overlapping sponsorships, which we spoke to the Synod about, and people who were running Casa Esperanza and Casa Concordia have been removed because of some financial irregularities. So Casa Concordia doesn't exist in the way that it used to exist when we stayed there and when we sponsored the children and the family there. But Casa Esperanza does continue to exist, and it now is directed by a committee of pastors and leaders in the church, and they have committed to financial transparency. They've committed to making sure that all the money donated to Casa Esperanza is given to the men. They'd like to amplify the ministry in terms of what they're able to offer to people who are on the street. Many of them are people who have been deported from the United States, because when they come back to El Salvador after having lived here for 20 years, they don't have connections or networks to pursue and often end up in the streets. So we are continuing to partner with them. We send them money twice a year, Chris, or once? Twice. So you think we send about 10,000, 5 to 10,000 a year to help with them, because they don't have a source of income. Obviously, the people who use their services can't pay for them. So we're going to be looking with them at ways that we can continue to support them. But going forward in our partnership, I think we will be looking also, we're formulating a small group to talk about what the future of our partnership should look like, because the relationship piece is kind of missing for us, partnering with Casa Esperanza. So we're looking at possibly partnering with the congregation, and we're going to be studying that this summer, and I'm going to let Pastor Chris finish up there on that.
I don't have too much more to say than that. But
Okay, you look like you wanted to have something.
no. Yeah, so it was we've had some difficult changes with how this is all changed for us with the partnership and with not having Trinity there anymore. But we're really pleased with how the bishop has brought in, I think it's 4 different pastors that are each taking different parts of it and helping to make it stronger and more transparent, like Gretchen said. And so we really didn't feel like this was the right time to go down there in January, as we often do, but we're looking at a trip in potentially August or so, like Gretchen said, bringing a group down that we have, where they are starting to look at different churches that we can directly partner with. That was one thing we didn't do with El Salvador right when we started. We had been partners in Tanzania I think we'd been for a couple of years at that point. And one of the experiences we had in Tanzania was when you're partnered with a direct church like Singisi, there was a sense that you're married. You know, you cannot have any other partnerships outside of this, and that seemed limiting to us. And so we said, well, when we go to El Salvador, we'd like to not have a direct church partnership, and so we eventually landed on Casa Esperanza. We still do. We still send the food shipments, so we still send those. How many of you helped package the rice bags? We did that a number of years ago, and I think we've talked about this before, but we haven't done the packaging of the rice bags for quite a while because that's very expensive, usually about $50,000 to do those. It's a great project and it's a great need, but what we realized is if we just raise money to pay for the shipping, then we can have that food that is packed by other churches and we can declare where it goes. Before, we couldn't even say where the food that we had packed would be able to go. So now we send approximately usually two shipments a year to El Salvador. So they get approximately 50,000 meals in one shipment. They just got one about a month ago. It's been about a month now, I think. And so they receive it at their port. They ship it in on a truck to the compound. They have churches come and divide it all up and send it out to all the different churches where they each get usually about a van load of boxes full of the rice. So that's really an important ministry we still do as well. And one thing we also do, I don't know if people know this, but St. Matthew's is the host for both the Meru Committee for the Synod and for Tanzania, and the El Salvador Committee for the Synod. So we host that monthly. Gretchen's actually the chairperson for the committee for the Synod. So that's something we also are a part of. So we're still very committed to El Salvador, want to see it grow, want to see it develop. We've got wonderful connections. We know now pretty much all the pastors. We have relationship with all the pastors, the bishop. We know more and more about the country. We know the struggles of the country. We have a good sense of all that. And so that knowledge can really help us with setting up the next partnership. And I think we are ready now to start saying there are a lot of benefits to having a direct relationship with another church. Just because those relationships are really what gives life to a partnership. You know, we had that with Trinity and her family until we had to stop that all. But we're looking forward to doing something like that next. And so, Nancy, you had a question?
Yeah, so then we're not going to partner with Casa Esperanza?
We'll still partner with, we'll do that as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that one gentleman said that through Casa Esperanza, he got an apartment?
Yeah, it's one of the spots at the place.
Okay.
At the location.
So is that something that they're trying to do to help? Because otherwise it's just the same thing over and over, feeding, feeding and feeding and feeding, you know, so there's no, there's no like further help that they're.
Yeah, so that apartment complex.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting space. There's about 15 to 20 apartment complexes up in Upper and Lower. They're very small, one-bedroom kind of places. Yeah. And only about 3 or 4 of them are owned by the church. And so just the middle ones are owned by the church. So they have one, I don't know if you were in that one that was up above where they do the painting and stuff. So I think they use that for when they need to help people get on their feet. And that's what he was living in the video. So there's not a lot of those. What we also have to realize is just how incredibly poor not only the people are that they're serving, but how poor the church is. So these churches are very small. Most have probably 20, 30 members in the church. 20, 30 very poor members in the church. So it's not like you've got 30 members that are all rich and helping to fund everything. They really struggle in finances. So we've got all sorts of great ideas, but it's like, wouldn't it be nice if this was the next step and things like that? And
It costs about
It's a lot.
$26,000 a year, $23,000 a year to do what they're doing right now. And every year it's a struggle.
Every year is a struggle to get that much money. Every year, it's like, we've got enough money to operate for another 2
like-
months unless we have an infusion of money. So to even think about, I mean, they do have an Alcoholics Anonymous program. They do, on a selected basis, try to help rehabilitate some people. They do, you know, a little hodgepodge kind of job training, or maybe hook people up with people who have employment possibilities, but they don't have the capacity to establish programs that, like a repairers or, you know, a ministry like that in the United States could do. I mean, dreaming it would be great, but
there's a lot of huge struggles that go with it. The other thing is, you know, I talked about Yvonne and some of that stuff.
yeah, actually,
So I know we're getting close to our end here.
yeah, I wanted to, we get a little bit uncomfortable talking about violence because sometimes we had a couple of college girls interested in going with us this year who decided not to go because of an article in the Wall Street Journal. And those articles are telling the truth, but they're not showing you the whole picture. So, you know, we want to make sure that that's the backdrop whenever we discuss violence. It is a violent country, but so is the United States, right? You're probably safer in a school in El Salvador than you are in the United States, by some measures. But in any event, there is a terrible amount of violence, but it mostly affects the people who live there. And it has to do with the gangs. It has to do with territory. It has to do with influence in the economic market, etc. So if they put a death threat out on you, you have to leave. You have to leave your home. You have to go somewhere else. And often people disappear. And there's been a little bit of an uptick in violence against Salvadorans in the past few weeks, and they're not really sure why. That's a whole huge discussion, how we deal with the violence in the United States' place in that as well. But I did, as I was getting ready for this last night, get a Facebook message from one of our friends in El Salvador. Her name is Yvonne, and she's about early 30s, I'd say. She has a little boy who's 7, or 8 maybe now, who we sponsor. She's got her master's degree, very well educated. She has a job, her husband has a job. They've made all, you know, what we would consider all the right choices. And she was last year she was on a bus that was attacked. She had someone in her neighborhood had been shot by the gang, so she's afraid to let her little boy go out and play. Well, last night I received a message from her that her cousin has disappeared. And no one knows why. She lives in the same community as her grandfather, who's a pastor, lives, and she said, I'm asking for prayers. She said, I don't know what to do. I feel so helpless. There's nothing I can do. All we can do is hope in God and pray. And I mean, to get that message is just, I mean, she talked about how helpless she felt, but I mean, how helpless I felt. So I did say that we were having this meeting today, and I would request prayers for her cousin, that she be found and found safe. They don't know any of the circumstances. They know a lot of times in this country when there's a disappearance, it's by choice. Probably not the case there, but so I'm asking for your prayers for that. I don't know her name, but Yvonne is our friend, is a cousin of Yvonne. So wanted to pass that on because we do get those messages sometimes, unfortunately. Hard to know what to do.
Do you ever feel unsafe there?
Pardon me?
Do you ever feel unsafe there yourselves?
No. No, because like I said, most of the violence is Salvadoran on Salvadoran. Rates of crime against gringos have been pretty stable for the last 20-some years, and most of the crime that affects gringos is usually muggings or robberies, not murders. And the church is extremely careful with us. Like, for instance, if there was heightened gang activity in a community, they would not take us there. They would not drive some places at night. So they're very careful with us. So I have never personally felt unsafe in El Salvador, but.
Yeah, no, I've never had a sense where you're always kind of thinking about it, just like anywhere. If I go into the inner city of Milwaukee, I'm thinking about what's around me and, you know, that kind of thing, but I haven't had that sense of great concern. I think the biggest concern they usually have for us is if we go into a marketplace and there's lots of people that are, you know, like, keep your purses, you know, don't bring your purse, keep it, you know, things like that. So usually they try to avoid even bringing us to like the traditional market where, you know, a couple hundred shops of stuff for sale. They'll take us to a artisan shop where it's more for tourists, you know, and that kind of thing, where it's much safer. They've got it gated and things like that. So I know we need to wrap it up here.
We would never go out alone, just in case.
Yeah, we would never just
We would
walk
never
alone.
let our kids that come with us go out alone. We would never do that.
So we're
All
okay.
those fancy groups.
So we hope by next January to be back up and running again with another trip. And it is always a wonderful experience, and the beautiful weather doesn't hurt either, especially right about now. Yeah, wonderful people that I truly call friends, and Gretchen does as well. So, thanks so much for coming out, everybody.